Hi, my name is Gil Lostick. I teach liturgy at CTU and have been here since the beginning of the school. I'd be happy to share today some reflections on CTU with you as we celebrate our 50th anniversary. I want to talk about three things. First of all, how we began and some of the mileposts along the way. Secondly, how Vatican II shaped our ethos at CTU. And thirdly, some of the blessings that we've experienced and can count on for the future. First of all, where we began. A little background first. Right before Vatican II, in the late 50s and early 60s, there was some discussion in seminary circles about perhaps having to think of a new model. Keep in mind that at that time, the late 60s, late 50s, early 60s, Catholic world was rather secluded. We lived in parishes. We didn't take too much part in other kinds of social activities of the country. During that time, however, there was a gradual mainstreaming of Catholic life in the church, and that came to a peak in a sense when President Kennedy was elected. And the suspicion that was often felt toward Catholics began to abate then. The seminaries in particular within the Catholic Church were also very secluded, often in rural places, and didn't really mingle much with the local population. The seminary discussions at that point began to talk about maybe collaborating in seminaries and perhaps even thinking about accreditation, which wasn't true at that time. There was also a desire to move into an urban setting where there could be better field education. Theology at that point was very speculative and not much concerned with pastoral practice. So where did we begin? The beginning really came for us in 1964 when Cardinal Leon Sunens of Brussels in Belgium came to the University of Chicago to give some talks, a number of conferences about what was happening at Vatican II. At that point, the Vatican II had begun to sketch out a very new and different understanding of the Church. And the audiences for Cardinal Sunens were very intrigued and enthralled by the new opening that was apparently coming about in Vatican II, more attention to ecumenism, more attention to the world around us. And so they began then to stir up some interest for us. And there were two men who were at the talks of Cardinal Sunens and followed up later, a Passionist and a Benedictine, who began to meet and discuss whether or not they might merge their schools and form a new union related to the University of Chicago University of Chicago in Chicago. The upshot of that was that a planning group was formed and my own province joined, so that there were three founding members then, the Passionists, the Servites, and our own Franciscan community. And by 1967, an agreement was reached that we would relocate in Chicago our three seminaries, closing where we had been for many hundreds of years together collectively, and form a union school. We finally located a building, it's 5401 across the street, where we first settled. We spent 3 hectic months rehabbing that school that was actually a transient and residential hotel combined, rehabbing that for our school purposes. There was a lot of sawdust and a lot of student and faculty hours spent creating different areas in the school. We opened our doors in the fall of 1968. We had 24 faculty and 105 students. Most of them were resident in 5401, so there was a lot of interaction, and we got to know our students not only in the classroom, but also over lunch and dinner tables, and just simply meeting in the foyer of the building. That then led us to a series of mileposts that the school gradually began to grow. The priorities in establishing the school were three. We wanted to be in an urban setting, close to a large university, and with an ecumenical context. And we chose it for those three reasons. My own province added a fourth reason. We wanted to be part of a collegial, cooperative seminary where our tradition of theology and Franciscan spirituality would be cross-fertilized by those of other communities, and that has certainly proved to be the case. We spent in those those months over the summer, also having to prepare a library for our collection of about 50,000 books that was gathered from the 3 seminaries. The librarians eventually spent 3 summers recataloging all this collection and reshelving it because they had been on different accession systems. We didn't have a dining room the first 2 months. We had food catered in 3 times a day to feed the whole group of us, 120 some people. And we also, fortunately, found that there was a synagogue nearby that no longer exists. This synagogue, Sinai Temple, had a classroom wing for primary education, and we were able to rent classrooms there. So, I mean, I always thought of it as sort of ironic. We were teaching about Jesus in the temple, but that saved us a lot of money until we could build some facilities of our own. The time that we made the school, that we started the school, was really a time of turmoil. If you remember, the war in Vietnam was going on. The bombing of Cambodia happened soon after that. There was a riot in Chicago for the Democratic Convention in 1968. The shooting of the Kent students just a year later. So the world was in turmoil, and our own church was in a bit of turmoil also because of all the changes and the upheaval that were caused by Vatican II. Some of the mileposts along the way were that in 1969, the SVD community, Divine Word community, joined us, and eventually they were responsible for making mission a very strong thread in our programming at CTU. There, 1972, when we received accreditation, both the ATS, Association of Theological Schools, and the North Central Accrediting Agency, we graduated our first time students, all those who had been there for 4 years. So we had a huge first graduation in 1972, and we were fully accredited at that point. 1973, the library was pretty much back in shape with all the re-cataloging. 1974, there was a conference for communities of religious women, and after listening to what was happening at CTU, many of them decided to send students here. So there was an influx of 24 sisters into our student body. There had been just one lay woman student before that. And that began a whole train of opening up our doors, not only to seminarians, but to lay people, men and women. Until now, easily half of our student body is lay men and women.